The message arrived on a cold morning in December when Admiral Jack Morrison was drinking his coffee on the observation deck of Earth Station Prime. He liked to watch the sunrise over the planet from this spot. It helped him think. It helped him remember why he had spent 40 years in the military. But this morning would be different from all the others. This morning would change everything. His communication officer, a young woman named Kate Sullivan, came running toward him with a datapad in her hands. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking. Jack had known Kate for 3 years, and he had never seen her look so frightened. She stopped in front of him and held out the pad without saying a word. Jack took it and looked at the screen. The signal was old. The encryption was old. The authentication codes were from a time before Kate was even born. They belonged to a ship called the USS Defiance. The ship had vanished 37 years ago during the first war between humanity and the Velthari Dominion. Everyone aboard had been declared dead. Families had mourned. Memorials had been built. The Defiance had become a symbol of sacrifice, but the codes were real. Jack checked them twice and then a third time. They were real. The message was simple. It said only 5 words. "We are coming home." Jack put down his coffee and activated his communicator. Within an hour, every senior officer in the United Earth Coalition knew about the signal. Within 2 hours, the news had spread to the colonies. Within 3 hours, families who had buried empty coffins 37 years ago were crying and praying and hoping for something they had never dared to hope for. The Velthari ambassador on Earth, a tall insectoid creature named Crixton, demanded a meeting with the Coalition Council. His species had been at war with humanity for decades before the current peace treaty. They had killed millions of humans, and humans had killed millions of them. The peace was fragile, and everyone knew it. Now something had changed, and Crixton wanted to know what it was. Jack ignored the ambassador for now. He had more important things to do. He ordered every sensor array in the solar system to focus on the outer rim. If the Defiance was coming home, then he wanted to see it with his own eyes. 3 days passed. On the 4th day, the ship appeared near Neptune. Jack was on the bridge of Earth Station Prime when the first images came through. He stared at the screen and felt his heart stop beating for a moment. The ship on the screen was the Defiance. He could see the name painted on its hull. He could see the familiar shape of its frame. But everything else was wrong. The hull was covered in strange patterns that glowed with soft blue light. Huge crystalline structures grew from the sides of the ship like wings made of ice. The energy readings were impossible. A single frigate should not produce power readings like that. A single frigate should not make the sensors scream with numbers that did not make sense. Kate stood beside him and whispered something under her breath. It sounded like a prayer. The Defiance moved through the solar system at speeds that no human ship could match. It passed Jupiter in hours instead of days. It slowed as it approached Mars and then stopped near Earth Station Prime. A communication request came through and Jack accepted it immediately. The face on the screen was familiar. Jack had seen it in old photographs and memorial videos. Captain Daniel Harper had been 42 years old when the Defiance vanished. He should have been 79 now if he was still alive. But the man on the screen looked exactly the same as he had 37 years ago. His hair was still dark. His eyes were still sharp. Only something in his expression had changed. There was a weight in his gaze that had not been there before. "Earth Command," Daniel said. "This is Captain Daniel Harper of the USS Defiance. We request permission to dock." Jack found his voice. "Permission granted, Captain. Welcome home." Daniel nodded slowly. "Thank you, Admiral. It has been a long journey, longer than you can imagine." He paused and something flickered in his eyes. "We have traveled farther than any human has ever gone. We have seen things that will change everything. And we bring gifts." The transmission ended and Jack sat down heavily in his chair. Around him, officers were shouting orders and running to their stations. The Defiance was approaching the docking bay. In a few minutes, the ghost of the past would walk among the living. Kate touched his shoulder gently. "Sir, what do we do now?" Jack shook his head. "I do not know, but I think nothing will ever be the same again." The Defiance docked without any problems. Its systems interfaced with the station perfectly, despite being decades out of date. The main airlock opened and a group of people walked out. They wore old uniforms that had been patched and repaired many times. Their faces were tired, but their eyes were bright. Jack counted them as they came through. There were 89 in total. The Defiance had left Earth with 400 crew members. More than 300 had not come back. Daniel Harper was the last one through the airlock. He walked toward Jack and stopped in front of him. The two men looked at each other for a long moment. Jack had been a young lieutenant when the Defiance vanished. He had known some of the crew. He had attended their memorial services. "You look older," Daniel said with a small smile. "You do not," Jack replied. "How is that possible?" Daniel glanced back at his ship. The blue light on its hull pulsed gently like a heartbeat. "Time works differently where we have been. For us, it has been 37 years. But we have also lived through things that felt like centuries." He turned back to Jack. "I will explain everything. But first, my crew needs rest. They have earned it." Jack nodded and gave the orders. Medical teams came forward to check the returning crew. Security officers stood by but kept their distance. Reporters tried to push through the barriers but were held back. The whole station was in chaos. Through it all, Daniel Harper stood calmly beside his ship. He watched the activity around him with eyes that had seen things no human was meant to see. He had left Earth as a soldier fighting a simple war. He had returned as something else entirely. The Defiance hummed quietly behind him. Its crystalline structures caught the light and scattered it into rainbows across the docking bay floor. Inside its hull, technologies that broke every known law of physics waited to be revealed. Humanity had sent out a warship. The universe had sent back a weapon, and the galaxy would never be the same. The survivors of the Defiance were given quarters on Earth Station Prime. Doctors examined them and found nothing wrong with their bodies. Their blood was normal. Their hearts were strong. Their bones were healthy. But something in their eyes made the doctors uncomfortable. These people had seen things that left marks deeper than any scan could find. Captain Daniel Harper slept for 18 hours straight. When he woke up, he showered, ate a simple meal, and asked to speak with the Coalition High Council. His first officer, Lieutenant Commander Nicole Garcia, went with him. She was a short woman with dark hair and a quiet voice. She had been 28 years old when the Defiance vanished. She still looked 28. The council chamber was a large room with seats arranged in a circle. 12 council members sat in their places, representing the major powers of the United Earth Coalition. Admiral Jack Morrison sat in the military section, and in a special seat reserved for alien diplomats, Ambassador Crixton watched with his compound eyes. His mandibles clicked softly as Daniel and Nicole entered the room. Daniel stood in the center of the circle. He did not look nervous. He looked tired. "Thank you for seeing me," he began. "I know you have many questions. I will answer as many as I can." Council President Maria Santos leaned forward. She was an older woman with gray hair and a kind face. "Captain Harper, where have you been for 37 years? Daniel took a deep breath. "On the last day of the Battle of Proxima, we engaged a Veltari battle group near the 4th planet. During the fight, a torpedo struck our experimental drive core. We thought we were going to die. Instead, the malfunction created a spatial tear. We were pulled through it before we could react. He paused and looked around the room. Every eye was fixed on him. We emerged on the other side of the galaxy, farther from Earth than any human had ever traveled. We were alone in space we did not recognize, with a damaged ship and limited supplies. His voice remained calm, but his hands tightened at his sides. We thought we would die out there in the dark. Nicole spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft but clear. We drifted for 3 months. Our food ran low. Our water recyclers began to fail. People started to lose hope. She looked at Daniel and something passed between them. Then they found us. Daniel nodded. We called them the Architects. We never learned their real name because human tongues cannot pronounce it. They were old, older than any species we had ever heard of. They had watched the galaxy for millions of years. They had seen civilizations rise and fall like waves on an ocean. Crixton made a harsh sound. There are no such beings. This is a story for children. Daniel turned to face the ambassador. His expression did not change. They knew about your people, Ambassador. They showed us records of the Velthari Dominion going back 50,000 years. They showed us what your empire has done to species that refuse to surrender. The room went silent. Crixton's mandibles stopped clicking. 17 species, Daniel continued. 17 intelligent races that your dominion declared enemies. 17 civilizations that were wiped out completely. Every man, woman, and child killed. Every city burned. Every record erased. You called it pacification. The Architects called it genocide. Crixton rose from his seat. You dared to accuse the Dominion of such crimes? On what evidence? I have recordings, Daniel said quietly. I have documents from Velthari archives that your own government deleted centuries ago. I have testimony from survivors of the Keth massacre who were rescued by the Architects before your soldiers could finish their work. He held up his hand and a small device projected images into the air. Cities burning, bodies piled in streets, ships firing on refugee transports. Is this enough evidence for you? The council members stared at the images in horror. Some of them looked away. President Santos gripped the arms of her chair until her knuckles turned white. Crixton stood frozen. His compound eyes reflected the images of death and destruction. He said nothing. Daniel lowered his hand and the images disappeared. The Architects watched us for 37 years. They tested us in ways I cannot describe. They wanted to know if humanity was worthy of their trust. His voice grew heavy. Many of us failed their tests. Many of us died. Many of us lost ourselves in the darkness. Nicole looked at the floor. Her jaw was tight. But in the end, they judged us worthy, Daniel said. They gave us their technology. Weapons that can unmake matter at the smallest level. Shields that exist outside normal space. Engines that travel faster than light without any limits. He met President Santos's eyes. They gave us everything they had. And then they left. Left? Santos asked. Where did they go? Beyond this universe, Daniel replied. Their time here was ending. They had watched over this region of the galaxy for millions of years, but they could not stay forever. They needed someone to take their place. They chose us. Crixton found his voice again. This is unacceptable. Such power in human hands threatens the stability of the galaxy. The Dominion will not allow this. Daniel turned back to the ambassador. His face was calm, but something dangerous moved behind his eyes. The Architects showed me something else, Ambassador. They showed me what your government is planning right now. A fleet is gathering at the edge of human space. 2,000 warships preparing to invade. Your leaders decided to destroy humanity before we could use our new abilities. The council erupted in shouting. Officers reached for communicators. Guards moved toward the doors. Daniel raised his hand and the room slowly quieted. The architects were peaceful beings, he said. They preferred to observe rather than interfere. But they understood that peace sometimes requires the ability to fight. He looked at Crix, then with something that might have been pity. They gave us that ability, and I intend to use it. Crix then stared at him for a long moment. Then the ambassador turned and walked out of the chamber without another word. President Santa stood slowly. Captain Harper, what exactly are you proposing? Daniel straightened his shoulders. The tired soldier vanished, and in his place stood something harder. Something forged in fires that burned beyond the stars. I am proposing that we show the Dominion what happens when they threaten humanity, he said. I am proposing that we end this war before it begins. And I am proposing that after today, no one in this galaxy will ever underestimate humans again. Nicole stepped forward to stand beside him. The other survivors of the Defiance were waiting outside the chamber. 89 men and women who had walked through hell and come back with fire in their hands. The universe had made a mistake. It had pushed humanity into a corner. It had forced them to evolve. Now it was time for the universe to learn what that meant. The Velthri invasion fleet arrived exactly when Daniel Harper said it would. 3 weeks after his testimony to the Council, long-range sensors detected 2,000 warships gathering at the border of human space. The Dominion had decided that humanity needed to die. They were not interested in peace or negotiation. They wanted extermination. Admiral Jack Morrison worked without sleep for days. He gathered every ship the Coalition could spare and sent them to the colony world of New Haven. 17 million civilians lived on that planet. If the Velthri fleet broke through, all of them would die. Jack had seen what the Dominion did to conquered worlds. He would not let that happen to New Haven. The human defense fleet assembled in orbit around the colony. 300 ships of various sizes. Cruisers and destroyers and frigates that had served for decades. Old ships with old weapons facing an enemy that outnumbered them 10 to 1. Captain Daniel Harper brought the Defiance to the front of the formation. His ship looked strange among the other vessels. Its crystalline structures glowed with that soft blue light that made everyone uncomfortable. Its hull hummed with power that the other captains could not understand. It was a single frigate facing a fleet that could conquer worlds. Jack contacted Daniel on a private channel. Captain, I have read your reports about the architect technology, but I need to ask you directly. Can one ship really make a difference against 2,000? Daniel was quiet for a moment. Nicole Garcia stood beside him on the bridge, her hands resting on the weapons console. Around them, the surviving crew of the Defiance worked their stations with calm efficiency. They did not look nervous. They looked ready. Admiral, Daniel finally said, the architects fought wars across distances that would take human ships centuries to cross. They faced enemies that made the Velthri look like children throwing stones. This ship was designed to end conflicts, not fight them. He paused. But I understand if you have doubts. Let me show you what we can do. The Velthri fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 2,000 ships arranged in attack patterns that had conquered dozens of species. At their center was the flagship of Fleet Admiral Vexinar, a massive dreadnought bristling with weapons. Vexinar had personally overseen the destruction of 3 civilizations. He was considered the greatest military mind in the Dominion. Vexinar opened a channel to the human fleet. His translated voice was cold and precise. Humans of Earth, you have developed technology that threatens the peace of the galaxy. Surrender your ships and submit to Dominion authority. Resist, and you will be exterminated. Jack Morrison responded with the dignity of a man who knew he might die today. This is Admiral Jack Morrison of the United Earth Coalition. We will not surrender. We will not submit. If you want our worlds, you will have to take them. Vexinar made a sound that might have been laughter. Brave words from a species facing extinction. Very well. You have chosen your fate. The Velthari fleet began to advance. Their weapons powered up, and their shields came online. 2,000. Ships moved forward, like a wave of death, ready to crash against a fragile shore. Daniel Harper transmitted to the entire human fleet. All ships, hold your positions. Protect New Haven. Leave the enemy to me. Then the Defiant shot forward at a speed that made tracking officers gasp. The ship moved so fast that it seemed to blur on the sensors. It crossed the distance between the fleets in seconds and plunged straight into the heart of the Velthari formation. Every enemy ship opened fire at once. Thousands of weapons discharged. Energy beams and missiles and torpedoes filled space with enough destructive power to crack a moon. The Defiant should have been vaporized instantly. Nothing could survive that kind of assault. But the Defiance was not touched. The ship danced through the barrage, like it knew where every shot would go before it was fired. Its shields flickered with strange light as the few attacks that came close were deflected into nothing. Nicole Garcia watched her console and smiled grimly. The architect's sensors saw everything. They predicted trajectories before weapons were fired. They calculated outcomes before battles began. Weapons ready, Nicole reported. Daniel nodded. Fire. The main cannon of the Defiance discharged for the first time in human history. A beam of light that was not quite light shot across space and struck a Velthari dreadnought. The massive warship did not explode. It simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there. The next moment it was gone. Its matter had been scattered across dimensions that had no names. The crew of the Defiance fired again, and again, and again. On the bridge of his flagship, Fleet Admiral Vexenar watched in horror as his ships disappeared one by one. No wreckage remained. No survivors could be rescued. Each vessel simply vanished as if it had never existed at all. All ships, focus fire on that frigate, Vexenar commanded. Destroy it at any cost. But nothing the Velthari did made any difference. Their weapons could not touch the Defiance. Their shields could not stop its attacks. Their numbers meant nothing when each shot from the human ship erased a vessel from reality. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, over 300 Velthari warships had been destroyed. The rest of the fleet broke formation and fled in complete disarray. Vexenar's flagship was among the first to retreat. The greatest military mind in the Dominion had been defeated by a single ship crewed by 89 humans. On New Haven, 17 million people watched the battle feed in stunned silence. They had expected to die today. They had expected their world to burn like so many others had burned under Velthari guns. Instead, they had witnessed something impossible. They had watched one ship stand against an armada and win. Someone in the capital city began to cheer. The sound spread like wildfire. Within minutes, the entire planet was celebrating. People danced in the streets and wept with relief and shouted the name of the ship that had saved them. The Defiance returned to formation among the human fleet. Its hull was unmarked. Its shields had held without strain. Its crew had not suffered a single casualty. Admiral Morrison contacted Daniel Harper with a voice that shook slightly. Captain, I did not know what to say. Daniel looked at his hands. They were steady, but there was no joy in his eyes. Do not thank me yet, Admiral. This was just the first battle. The Dominion will not stop because of one defeat. They will come back with more ships and better tactics. He looked up at the stars that surrounded them. And they are not the worst thing out there. Not by a long way. The celebration continued on New Haven. Songs were written about the Defiance. Stories were told about Captain Harper and his miraculous crew. Humanity had found its champion, and they wanted to believe that the worst was over. But Daniel Harper knew the truth. The worst was yet to come. And he would have to prepare humanity for a darkness they could not imagine. The weeks after the Battle of New Haven were filled with celebration. Every news channel across human space talked about nothing but the Defiance. Children played with toy versions of the ship. Artists painted pictures of its blue crystalline wings. Politicians gave speeches about the dawn of a new era for humanity. Captain Daniel Harper became the most famous human alive. Corporations offered him enormous sums of money to appear in their advertisements. Governments wanted him to attend ceremonies and parades. Talk show hosts begged for interviews. Everyone wanted a piece of the hero who had saved 17 million lives. Daniel refused all of it. He retreated to a small apartment on Luna, Earth's moon. He asked for privacy, and the coalition respected his wishes. His crew scattered across the lunar colony, staying in simple quarters provided by the military. They kept to themselves. They attended the required medical examinations and debriefings, but otherwise avoided public attention. People found this strange. Heroes were supposed to enjoy their fame. Heroes were supposed to smile for cameras and shake hands with admirers. But the survivors of the Defiance did not act like heroes. They acted like people carrying a weight that no one else could see. Admiral Jack Morrison noticed this. He had spent 40 years in the military, and he knew what trauma looked like. He had seen soldiers return from terrible battles with that same haunted expression. So one evening, he went to Luna to visit Daniel personally. He found the captain alone in a darkened room. The only light came from a holographic display showing a map of the galaxy. Billions of stars glowed softly, each one representing systems that humanity had never visited. Daniel sat in a chair facing the display. He did not look up when Jack entered. "You won a victory that will be remembered for 1,000 years, Jack said. "But you look like a man attending his own funeral." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. The stars rotated slowly in front of him. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy. "The architects did not give us this technology because they were kind, Jack. They gave it to us because they needed us." Jack sat down in a chair across from him. "What do you mean?" Daniel turned away from the stars. His eyes were tired and old despite his young face. "The architects were dying. Not from disease or war. They were simply reaching the end of their existence in this universe. They had lived for so long that they could not continue anymore. They were ready to pass beyond, to leave this reality for something else." He paused and looked at his hands. But they could not leave their region of the galaxy unprotected. For millions of years, they had watched over this part of space. They had kept certain things locked away. They had prevented certain forces from spreading. His hands tightened into fists. They needed someone to take their place. A younger species that could carry on their work. Jack felt a chill despite the controlled temperature of the room. "So they chose us." "They chose us," Daniel confirmed. "But not because we were special. They chose us because we were the best option among several bad choices. The Velthari were too cruel. The Terrans of the outer colonies were too fragmented. We were the only civilization in this region with the potential to grow into what they needed." He stood and walked to the holographic display. His hand passed through the stars as he pointed at a dark region far beyond any human charts. "But the power came with a price, Jack. The architects did not just test our ability to fight. They tested our minds, our spirits, our capacity to endure horrors without breaking." His voice grew rough. 37 years. They made us watch civilizations collapse. They showed us wars that killed trillions. They forced us to make choices that destroyed parts of our souls. Jack stood slowly. "What kind of choices?" Daniel did not answer immediately. He stared at the dark region of the map. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. 311 of my crew could not handle it. Some went mad and had to be restrained. Some took their own lives when the visions became too much. And some became something else. He turned to face Jack. Something that was no longer human. something that I had to put down myself. The room felt colder. Jack saw tears in Daniel's eyes for the first time. I killed 37 of my own people, Jack. Men and women who trusted me. Friends I had known for years. The architect's tests broke them and turned them into things that could not be allowed to live. He wiped his face roughly. That is the price of this power. That is what I carry with me every day. Jack did not know what to say. He had never imagined such horrors. The celebrations seemed obscene now. People dancing in the streets while these survivors lived with memories that would never fade. Why are you telling me this? Jack finally asked. Daniel walked back to the holographic display. He zoomed out until the entire galaxy was visible. Then he pointed at several regions scattered across the map. Each region was marked with a symbol that Jack did not recognize. Because the architects are gone now. They passed beyond this universe completely. They left us as their heirs. But they also left us their enemies. Daniel's voice hardened. There are things out there, Jack. Ancient things that the architects kept locked away for millions of years. Things that make the Veltari look like insects. He zoomed in on one of the marked regions. The image showed something that Jack could not understand. It was not a ship or a station or a planet. It was something else. Something that hurt to look at. The seals are weakening. Without the architects to maintain them, these things will eventually break free. When that happens, they will spread across the galaxy like a plague. Daniel turned to face Jack with determination in his eyes. Humanity wanted a champion. Now you have one. But champions do not get to rest. Champions do not get to heal. We need to build more ships. Train more crews. Prepare for what is coming. Jack stared at the image on the display. His military mind was already working on logistics and strategies. But part of him was terrified in a way he had never been before. How long do we have? He asked. Years, maybe decades. The architects gave us time, but not forever. Daniel put his hand on Jack's shoulder. I am sorry to put this burden on you, old friend, but I cannot do this alone. None of us can. Jack looked at the man who had once been a simple warship captain. The man who had sacrificed everything to bring hope back to humanity. The man who now carried the weight of the entire galaxy on his shoulders. What do you need? Jack asked. Daniel smiled for the first time in weeks. It was a tired smile, but it was real. I need you to help me build an army. And so they began. In secret meetings and hidden shipyards, the work started. Humanity was about to take its first steps toward becoming something greater than anyone had ever imagined. But they would also be walking toward a darkness that waited at the edge of the stars. The cost of power was high, but the cost of weakness would be extinction. 1 year passed since the Defiance returned to Earth. In that time, the galaxy had changed more than it had in the previous century. The Veltari Dominion sued for peace after their defeat at New Haven. They surrendered territories they had held for hundreds of years. Their new leaders spoke of humanity with fear and respect. The war that had cost millions of lives was finally over, but Daniel Harper knew that the true war had not yet begun. Working in secret with Admiral Jack Morrison, Daniel oversaw the construction of 7 new warships. Each vessel was built using architect technology. Each one could match the firepower of an entire fleet. Each crew was selected through a process that tested not just combat skills, but psychological strength. Only those who could face the darkness without breaking were allowed to serve. The ships were given names that carried weight. The Vigilant, the Resolute, the Endeavor. They patrolled human space in silence, watching for threats that most people did not know existed. Their crews understood their mission. They were the first line of defense against something that ordinary humans could not comprehend. And now the time had come to take the next step. The newest ship in the fleet was called the Horizon. It was smaller than the others, but faster and more advanced. It had been designed specifically for exploration in dangerous territories. Its mission was different from its sister ships. While they defended human space, the Horizon would venture beyond the borders of known space. It would scout the regions that the architects had warned about. It would find the threats before they could find humanity. Captain Nicole Garcia stood on the bridge of the Horizon and looked at her crew. She had been Daniel Harper's first officer for nearly 40 years. She had survived the same trials he had survived. She had seen the same horrors he had seen. Now, she carried forward his vision while he remained behind to coordinate the defense of Earth. Her crew was young but capable. Ensign Marcus Webb sat at the navigation console. He was a quiet man from the colony world of Nova Terra. He had joined the military after the Valkyrie destroyed his hometown during the war. He wanted to make sure no one else lost their home the way he had. Chief Engineer Lavra Patterson monitored the architect's systems from her station. She was one of the few engineers who truly understood how the alien technology worked. She had spent months studying the Defiance before being assigned to the Horizon. She treated the ship like a living thing, and the ship seemed to respond to her care. Lieutenant Kevin Drake handled communications. He was the youngest officer on the bridge. He had graduated from the academy just 6 months ago, but his tests had shown an unusual ability to stay calm under pressure. Nicole needed people who could face the impossible without panicking. The rest of the crew numbered 47 souls. Each one had been selected for their strength of character as much as their skills. Each one understood that they might not come back from this mission. Daniel Harper appeared on the main screen. He was standing on the bridge of the Defiance, which remained in orbit around Earth. His face was calm, but Nicole could see the worry in his eyes. She knew him too well to be fooled. Captain Garcia, Daniel said formally. The Horizon is cleared for departure. Are you ready? Nicole looked around her bridge one last time. Her crew was at their stations. Her ship was running perfectly. Everything was in order. We are ready, Captain Harper. Daniel nodded slowly. Good. You know your mission. Scout the outer regions. Identify potential threats. Report back anything unusual. He paused. And Nicole, be careful out there. We cannot afford to lose you. Nicole allowed herself a small smile. I did not survive 37 years of architect trials just to die on my first solo mission, Daniel. I will be careful. The connection ended, and Nicole turned to face the view screen. Ahead of them was a swirling gateway of light and energy. It was a portal created by architect technology. It would carry them across distances that would take conventional ships centuries to cross. On the other side was unknown space. Territory that no human had ever explored. Nicole activated the ship-wide communication system. Her voice carried to every corner of the Horizon. All hands, this is the captain. 38 years ago, the Defiance left Earth as a simple warship fighting a simple war. We came back as something more. We came back as proof that humanity can face the unknown and emerge stronger. She paused and looked at the gateway. It pulsed with light that seemed almost alive. Today, we are not running from anything. We are not fighting for survival. We are choosing to step into the darkness because that is what humans do. We explore. We adapt. We endure. She smiled despite the tension. And sometimes we make the universe regret underestimating us. Around the bridge, her crew laughed quietly. The tension broke like ice in spring. Marcus Webb turned from his console. Course is set, Captain. Ready on your order. Nicole straightened in her chair. Helm, take us through. The USS Horizon surged forward. The gateway swallowed them in a flash of blue light. For a moment, the ship seemed to stretch across infinity. Then they emerged on the other side. The stars were different here. Older somehow. The constellations were unfamiliar, and the darkness between them seemed deeper. Nicole felt a chill run down her spine despite the warmth of the bridge. Lavra Patterson checked her readings. All systems normal, Captain. The jump was successful. Good, Nicole replied. Begin long-range scans. I want to know everything about this region. The crew went to work. The horizon drifted through the ancient darkness, its sensors reaching out like invisible fingers. Somewhere in this unexplored space were the threats that the architects had feared. Somewhere out here were things that could destroy civilizations, but humanity had faced impossible odds before. They had survived extinction. They had defeated empires. They had taken the gifts of an ancient race and made them their own. Behind them, Earth shone like a pale blue dot in the vast distance. Small and fragile and utterly irreplaceable. 17 billion people going about there. Lives without knowing that a handful of brave souls were venturing into the darkness on their behalf. Ahead of them waited wonders and terrors beyond imagination. Nicole Garcia looked at the unknown stars and felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope, fear, excitement, all mixed together in a feeling that she could not name. Whatever is out there, she said quietly to herself. We will be ready. The horizon sailed on through the endless night. Its mission was just beginning, and the universe would learn that humanity was no longer a young species stumbling through the stars. They were guardians now, heirs to the architects, protectors of the galaxy dot, and they would not fail.